Hi, class. Welcome back. It's Dr. Lindner. We are still on neurology, and for the next section, we're going to be talking about the neuron. Now, in the neural system, we have two types of cells. One of them is called the neuron, right? So that's the first type of cell, and that's electrically excitable. The second type of cell are called neuroglial cells. They're called neuroglial or neuroglial cells, which, if you look at the word and break them down, it really means nerve glue. Glial means glue. So neuroglial cells are the glue that kind of works in conjunction with the neurons. But only the neuron is electrically excitable. The neuroglial cell, I think we have, I forget if there's 6 or 7. I think there's 6 neuroglial cells, maybe 7, and I'll go over each of those shortly. So the neuron, if we look at this, has several different parts, but it is the only part that's electrically excitable. When we look at neuron, messages travel in this direction. They go this way. See, it says nerve impulse. Goes down all the way to the end. The end, before the end, right here, that's the terminal, like going to the airport, always has a terminal. But at the end of the axon terminal is this swollen part called a synaptic end bulb. That should be a little bit familiar to when you covered myology, because if you think back to the subject, neuromuscular junction, we had this swollen end bulb, and it had those neurotransmitters, remember acetylcholine, and then on this end was the muscle, and you would have calcium that rushes in, tells this neurotransmitter, the neurotransmitter in there is acetylcholine, tells that acetylcholine to open up and release its contents in the synaptic cleft. So now you got acetylcholine floating in the synaptic cleft, which is between this and this. This is presynaptic, and this side is postsynaptic. This is the synaptic cleft. So before it is presynaptic, after it is postsynaptic. The acetylcholine hits these receptors on the muscle end, the motor end plate, and when it does, it opens up and sodium would rush in. And when sodium rushes in, it creates the electrical current, right? The depolarization. So now we could see here's one neuron, and it's sending the action potential or the nerve impulse down in this direction, and then it relays it to another one. The one before is the presynaptic, that's sending the message, and the one receiving is the postsynaptic. And right where the two meet is the synapse. You got presynaptic, postsynaptic. On the presynaptic side, that's where that contains all those little circular vesicles that contain those neurotransmitters, right, that had acetylcholine in it. Here's another picture. You got your presynaptic and you got your postsynaptic, right? Pre and post. And then there's the synaptic cleft in between. There's the axon terminal. At the end is the end bulb. These are the vesicles with the neurotransmitter. And what ends up happening is calcium influxes gives the message for these to release their neurotransmitter. And it does so through that method called exocytosis. That's an AMP1 word. The neurotransmitter, whatever it may be, hits a receptor. And then, boom, the nerve impulse continues. Now, some neurotransmitters are excitatory and some are inhibitory. Okay, so if you take a neurotransmitter like acetylcholine, acetylcholine is excitatory at the neuromuscular junction. But if we take something like GABA, which is gamma aminobutyric acid, GABA is inhibitory. Like in the morning when you get up, when that alarm clock goes off, there's glutamate. Glutamate, which is an excitatory neurotransmitter, helps you get up and out of bed. And then glutamate, as the day progresses into the evening, converts itself into GABA, and you need your B vitamins for that, especially B1 and B6 to make that conversion. So if you're trying to go to bed at night and you have no problem, that means you got good GABA. That's inhibitory. It shuts down the brain. But if you're wired at night and you got all these thoughts going through your head, it means you're GABA deficient or B vitamin deficient. So it's having trouble converting glutamate to GABA. Right? If you're the person that can't wake up in the morning, you're always hitting the snooze button for 5 more minutes of sleep, you're glutamate deficient and GABA dominant. Right? Think of this as like the flower opening up in the morning and then the flower closing at night. That's how this works. Okay, so the neurons, these are the functional unit of the neural system. A lot of times on these national board exams or state board exams, they like to ask the functional unit questions, like what's the functional unit of the kidney? What's the functional unit of the neural system? So the functional unit of the neural system is the neuron. That's the functional unit. Not to be confused with the functional unit of the kidney, which is the nephron, right? Don't confuse nephron with neuron. That's kidney. These are electrically excitable. They produce action potentials. So when you hear the word action potential, think electricity. Within the neuron, there's a cell body and cell processes. The cell body is like any cell. It has all the different organelles. It has a nucleus. It's got ribosomes. It's got in the neuron, it has these structures called nissl bodies that are very, very similar to the rough ER and ribosomes because they make proteins. And when we talk about protein synthesis for the neuron, we're thinking neurotransmitters. That's why protein in your diet is so important. When people are malnourished and they're not eating properly and they either have eating disorders, it's usually linked to mental disorders because without protein, you can't make the proper neurotransmitters for the neurons or the rest of your physiology to function properly. Proteins are the secret to life. You want to have good protein. And I know, look, I'm not here to have a debate or an argument with anyone. I do nutrition. I understand that there's hundreds of diets out there. And whichever diet works for you, you found it, congratulations. There isn't one way that is the best way. Some swear it's ketogenic. Some swear it's Paleolithic. Some swear it's fruitarian. Some swear it's pescatarian. Some swear it's carnivore diet. And some swear, vegan. If it works for you, you found your way. And just because it works for you now doesn't mean it works for you in all stages of life. So you have to be able to adjust. But the first 5 years of life, the brain needs animal fat to develop properly. So my only beef, and I tell parents, if you have children, if you're a vegetarian or vegan and you don't want animal products, that's great, but the developing brain needs animal fat. After 5, do what you want, but trust me, for those first developing years of neurology, that's heavily relying on animal fat. Let that baby and that child have that, please. Okay. So we have cell body and the cell processes, dendrites and axons. When we go back, the cell body is this. Sometimes the cell body is called the soma, The branches are called dendrites, which comes from the Greek word dendra. Dendra means branches of a tree. So you got dendra or dendrites, you got the soma or cell body, where we have the nucleus, and you've got those nissl bodies, those little circular things, small little circular buttons in there that have those neurotransmitters from the protein synthesis. And then we have the axon, which sends the message away in this direction. The dilated part of the axon right here is the axon hillock. That's the axon hillock. Notice that the axon, which is the yellow, over here, is protected by this myelin sheath. Myelin sheath is cholesterol, fat. That's what the myelin is. It's fatty cholesterol. The myelin sheath is produced by not a neuron, it's produced by a neuroglial cell, which is called a Schwann cell. This Schwann cell produces myelin. And what the myelin does is it speeds up the action potentials. It's an insulator. It insulates and speeds up the action potential so we get to the end super, super quick. Okay? So here are the dendrites. These are the branches on the outside. This entire structure is the cell body. There are the dendrites. There's the cell body. You can see you got a nucleus. And all these little dark things around, those are the nissl bodies that make the protein synthesis, the neurotransmitters. Here's your axon hillock. Right, looks like that triangular area. Here's your axon going all the way down. Now, remember I said the axons are protected by myelin. So this is a cross section of that myelin. Here's the axon in the center. This is the myelin sheath. And it's produced by the Schwann cell. Now, between each Schwann cell, there's a gap that's not myelinated, and that's called a node of Ranvier. It's not myelinated. So when your action potential or nerve impulses travel, they jump from node to node. They jump over the unmyelinated part, and that's what speeds up the conduction of impulses. So dendrites bring information to the cell body, whereas your axons conduct the impulses away. And the way you remember that, axon starts with A, and so does the word away. A and away. Okay. The axon hillock is here. Just adjacent to it is the initial segment. That's where the impulses arise. The action potential travels all the way down to the end, right? Those swollen tips at the end are filled, those synaptic end bulbs are filled with proteins called neurotransmitters. And if this was a muscle, at the end, the excitatory neurotransmitter would be acetylcholine. Okay. All right, so this is a Connect picture that has shown up in the past. So we're looking at the highlighted structure. So remember, there are sensory neurons and there are motor neurons. So your choices are motor end plate. Well, let's say skeletal muscle fiber. That's the pink stuff. Can't be that. Motor end plate. That's this part. Schwann cell. Well, that surrounds the axon. Synaptic cleft. And so the best answer, it's a motor neuron or an axon of a motor neuron. Okay, so this right here is presynaptic. This right here is postsynaptic. So the presynaptic, this has all those little vesicles, remember? And then in between this little gap, the space between the two, that's the synaptic cleft. Okay? Postsynaptic membrane, that's this one, on this side. Synapse, that's this. Neurotransmitters, synaptic vesicles in the presynaptic terminal. That's your best answer. That's your best answer. All right, now we're looking at this, which is the highlighted structure. Well, that's the synaptic cleft. All right, now we're looking at a neuron. The large thing in the center, let's see if I can outline the whole thing. Let me make this black for you. So all of this, right, these would be the dendrites. These are the branches, right? This is the, right here, that's the soma, or the cell body of the neuron. This portion here, that's the axon hillock, and then the rest of that is axon. Everything around it, that's the glue, these are all neuroglial cells supporting it. Okay, so now you can see the neuron again, now that your eyes can see it. Now it's looking at those little vesicles on the inside. Those are the nissl bodies. Now we're looking at the highlighted finger, right? This would be like the fingers, this is the palm, and this is your forearm, right? Think of a neuron when you look at your hand, your fingers. Right? Let's look at the hand. There's your thumb, first digit, there's the birdie, the ring, the pinky, there's your wrist, and then your forearm, right? So think of the digits are the dendrites, your palm, that's the cell body, and then your forearm, that would be your axon. Easy way to kind of study it and learn it. All right, so what's the dilated part right here, the little triangular area? That's the axon hillock. Okay, so the highlighted stuff going all around, this is all that cholesterol, that fatty cholesterol. That's the myelin. That's the myelin sheath. Okay, the myelin sheath. Here in the center, that's the axon that we see here. And then this line there, that one, that's the unmyelinated sections. Those would be the nodes of Ranvier. Okay, so now the highlighted part there, that's the axon. It's just the myelinated axon. What's around it is the myelin. That was this. That's the myelin sheath. This is the actual axon, but it's a myelinated axon. Okay, now we're looking at those blue aqua highlighted structures here. That's going to be your node of Ranvier. Okay, that's the node. Okay, good place to take a break. When I come back, we'll get into the structural and functional classification of neurons.